broadcasting from an undisclosed location under a farm pond somewhere in the Midwest. Your host is Jim Crowley. This is Slickfish Radio. Hey, everybody, welcome back to another edition of Slickfish Radio. Man, that was a quick week. This time of year, we just have a lot of these episodes coming up. And this week, I'm great to talk to this guy. I love having John Murray is going to join us here in just a little bit. Hey, Jim Colba just chimed on. Hi, Jim. How you doing? Good to see you. And as you guys are chiming on tonight, let us know where you're from if you want to. Don't be shy. Happy to have you all here as always. I want to thank our sponsors that help bring the show to you each and every episode, as well as our great audience. We wouldn't have a show if it wasn't for all of you. So thank those of you coming on. More of you are coming on. Thanks for coming on. I sure appreciate that. Want to thank our friends over at Lure Parts Online, over at Cast King, at Mudhole, Wired to Fish Coffee. Matter of fact, you know me, always having some caffeine. Dakota Lithium and Shields. So all of those great folks, great people. If you've been watching our social media, and I'm going to be making some announcements later in the show, but I'm actually going to be doing a lure build live tomorrow night with Lure Parts Online on TikTok. So if any of you want to join us on TikTok tomorrow night, that's going to be a lot of fun. Never done a live on TikTok before. So we're going to get our feet wet tomorrow night, and that's going to be fun. But you all didn't come here just to hear me talk. I'm going to bring this guy in. And I got a lot of buttons here. Hey, John, how are you?
How you doing, Jim?
Good. Great to see you, man. Thanks for taking time out. I know you're on the road and busy, so I appreciate you stopping by.
Yeah, just from a pretty rainy Sam Rayburn, Texas. It's been raining for 2 days and finally stopped, and the Derby starts tomorrow, so we better get going.
Yeah, how's the fishing been for you? What's your feeling on it?
Well, we've had three completely different days. The first day was gorgeous, like 75 degrees, sunny, calm. Fishing was really good. Caught a lot of fish. Didn't catch any big ones. Second day we got cold. It was, I was freezing out there. It was, down in the 40s and 50s, and fishing was okay. Still caught a lot of fish, but never got a big bite. And then the last day it started raining in about 10 o'clock, and I mean torrential rain. So I got off the water, but um, the fishing has been good here. There was a tournament Saturday, 41 pounds for five
Oh,
fish won. So
goodness.
we can't say there's not any big fish biting somewhere. I have
Oh.
not found anything like that, but it's been fun. On Texas lakes, you could do that. You could get a 8 to 10, 12 pound bite at any time. So that's the exciting part of this. It's going to be fun to get out there and just see what happens.
After all these years, and if I'm not mistaken, you started tournament fishing, even probably getting into business around what, 1985 or so,
Yep.
something like that. And maybe you're the same way I am. When you're going to a lake that you have the possibility of catching a big fish or a bigger fish, still kind of gets the blood pumping, doesn't it?
It does, and it seems like sometimes when you come to Texas and you get those big bites in practice, you don't get them in the tournament. So I'm hoping the fact that I haven't got any in 3 days, maybe I'm due. But yeah, they're living down there, and if you make the right cast with the right bait, you might be a hero that day.
Now, with all these fronts that are coming through, is Texas anything like Florida, where those fish get really, really picky, especially if it's a cold front earlier in the year? Do you find that happening with Texas fish, or they're not as sensitive as those Florida fish are?
I don't feel they're as sensitive. They're when they come up, there was 60, 70 degree water here a couple days ago.
Right.
When they come up, they're up for a reason, and they're aggressive. There's a lot of them, but the size isn't. There's a lot of smaller fish. So you're you're not struggling to get bites. You're struggling to catch good ones, and that's the difference. Florida, sometimes you're just struggling to get a bite
A
when you
bite.
have big fronts, but here you're getting to get bites. It's just what size you're going to get.
Yeah, I've noticed that in Florida, when I fished it is, everybody, not everybody, but a lot of people are under the illusion that every time you go to Florida, you're going to get big fish. And I mean, I went to 20, 30 fish before you get a really good bite. And sometimes it's more than that, you
Yeah,
know,
sometimes it is.
and
Yes.
I've had one bite out there before in a whole day that was a big fish, but that's the only bite you got. It's still fishing. And one of the places that happened to me is where you're going next, I think, and that's Toho. And I fished that a couple years ago right before I cast, and yeah, it was one bite all day. It was 7 pounds, but you better not miss that bite. Now, are you looking forward to fishing down there in Toho again? Because that can be an awesome body of water.
It's actually my favorite Florida fishery. I've done the best there. But yeah, it boils down to the same thing. You better figure out a way to catch that bigger 5 to 7 pound bite,
Mhm.
because if you just catch those pound, half, and 2 pounders, you're going to be in last place. So it's the same type of deal. I like it, Toho and Kissimmee, because you got a bunch of different lakes. You
Sure.
got a lot of different things to do. It won't just be electronics fishing. It'll, you can flip, you can punch, you can chatterbait. So there's a lot of stuff you can do in Florida, and I really like it down there this time. Yeah, I mean, hopefully I'm wearing shorts instead of
Yeah.
everything I own like tomorrow. So that's the key.
Yeah, no kidding. Where I am here in the Midwest, it's so cold and we got more snow again today. I mean, this snow with me is getting about as popular as the halftime show at the Super Bowl was, man. Just not cool. I
Not
just
cool.
just not cool. I'm not enjoying that at all. I like ice fishing, but dude, I'm ready to get out to some open water. I want to go back. I want to go back a little bit. And when you first started and came from the West Coast, was it around the same time as like Gary Klein or D Thomas? Because I they more or less brought, kind of flipping and things like that over. But your specialty was, and I think just about before anybody else, was fishing deep structure. And obviously you did very, very well back then. I don't think I've known anybody in their career that has won more boats. I think it's what 30, 31 you've won over your career. It's a ton of them. But there was, did you were you one of the main ones who kind of brought the offshore or the deeper water fishing more to this part of the country?
Well, I started early in the 80s and 90s coming out here some, but I always ended up fishing in the West. Back then we had a lot of good tournaments in the West. So I'd come out here. It's like I'd win money in the West and I'd spend it out in the East. So I really never fished the East, like with a passion till
Okay.
2003. 2002 was the first year I made the classic and all that. So yeah, I was known as a deep water electronics guy because
Mhm.
I used to put a paper graph up front to
Wow,
to
yeah.
get good visuals down.
Sure.
So people think, oh, this live scope stuff probably fits right up your alley, and it doesn't. It's a different mentality. It's a different everything. But no, it's definitely been an advantage. I've had LiveScope from the beginning,
Mhm.
and I use it more for seeing brush piles out there, seeing grass lines out there, seeing stuff. Before you get over it, you can make the cast properly. I've never been the one to just go out in open water and look for fish and cast at them. That's never been something I've really enjoyed. But I understand the guys are really good at doing that.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think it for me I prefer to look at a point and visualize it in my mind and see how it
Mhm.
goes. Live scope, you can just basically pan out there and well, there's no fish here. I'm not even going to make a cast, and that sort of takes a lot of it out for fishing. I want to picture it, and I want to picture that bass down there. And even if he's not there, I want to think that he is. So it's changed a lot in the way you approach fishing, and I guess it makes you a lot more efficient if you use it properly. And
Mhm.
I'm a little old school. I get stuck in, man, I gotta still make a cast out there, even if I don't see any. Yeah, the chatterbait is definitely on your rods. There's no doubt. I
Yeah.
have made a little push in the last couple years to throw a spinnerbait more than I used to. I mean, I grew up throwing a spinnerbait as well as a big fish lure. It's always caught them, and I got away from it with the chatterbait. And so I think I've done that a lot more. A square bill is still just a bait.
Oh, yeah.
If you need to cover water, they'll bite a square bill. But
Yep.
yeah, you keep it simple. Like you said, if you have confidence in it that you're going to get bites, that's what you want to be throwing. You don't want to pick up something you've never caught a bass on because you probably never catch a bass on it anyway.
Yeah, the wrong time to try out a new lure is the day before or the day of the tournament. That's not the time to try out the new bait usually. You should get some practice under your belt with it. Can you tell us a little bit about the Westie worm?
So Westy worm was developed in Arizona as a double hook worm,
Okay.
pre-rigged. When I saw it, is in a package. It has a jig head and then a second hook tied behind it. So it's two hooks in on a super float worm. So when I
Okay.
saw it, I thought it was like, oh, that's a beginner, like with the spinners and
Mhm.
stuff. And I drew a guy at Saguaro Lake when I was a kid, and he had that, and I had my Texas rig, ringworm. I was like, man, I'm going to kick this guy's butt. Well, after he caught the seventh fish in a row and I hadn't got a bite, I asked, "Hey, can I have one of those things?" And man, it just, I mean, literally, if there's one lure that I've caught more bass in Arizona on than anything else, it's a Westy worm. And
Really?
literally, I haven't caught one on it in 25 years, but that's how many I caught back in the day on it. It's just a tremendous lure. It's a do nothing worm.
Hmm.
It has a heavy head and a light head. And I mean, man, it just, for Arizona, it was incredible.
I remember a pre-rig worm back in the day. It's called a little action Mac, and it had three of these little tiny,
Tiny
just
hooks.
really tiny razor blade sharp hooks. And man, I'll tell you what, if you know, just as a young kid, when you're going to a farm pond or a gravel pit or anywhere where there's clear water, I remember fishing a tournament on Pickwick one time. Biggest fish I had in tournament. I was getting desperate, and I tied on a pre-rig worm and caught a 5 pound largemouth on a pre-rig worm. And I was like, you know what? I don't care. Fish bite those things, man. I don't know what it is about that goofy little pre-rig, but man, I'll tell you what, it can be. It's one of those forgotten lures that if people tied them on once in a while in the right situations, it'd catch a lot of fish, wouldn't it?
Yeah, they still catch fish, and it is funny. A couple years ago, I tried one at Douglas Lake in
Hmm.
Tennessee by my house and caught a 5 pounder. And I thought, wow, I've got something here. And then
Yeah.
and the next day in the tournament, I didn't catch anything on it. But I was like, I got a secret bait. But it didn't work. It caught the one big one, and that was it.
So what, we're and I want to talk a little bit about this before we go to the break and just a little bit, but we got plenty of time. But I really like one of my favorite things about your pages is I really do, and we'll get into talking about tournaments and stuff like that. We'll do that again, guys. So, but I just while I'm thinking about this, I want to talk to John about he's really into old school baits, kind of like I am too. And I love going to places and seeing the old baits. You posted something recently about the Smithwick Rogue, which is one of the first jerk baits I ever threw. Bomber Long A was another one way back in the day that I would throw a lot. And but there's some baits out there that people have forgot about, I think, but I love when you bring them back to the surface because there's been a couple times when you posted something and I went, oh my God, I remember that. That I haven't, because we get inundated with so much new stuff, right? Almost on a monthly basis, sometimes more than that. And what are some of your favorites that come to mind that you think maybe somebody hasn't heard of in a while, just off the top of your head?
Well, my when I was a kid, is there's two of them: the Deep We Are, Rebel Deep We Are, and the little the Fat Wrap, the original. We call it
Yeah.
Fat Wrap, and those
Yeah.
two is all I ever needed in Arizona. I mean, I won my first three tournaments I ever won, and all I did was crank a Deep We Are, and then I'd throw the bigger Fat Wrap once in a while, and it was just. And I haven't used either one of those baits in 25, 30 years. Do the fish not eat them, or do I don't throw them, or no one, you just wonder. That's what it started. I was like, do they, that's why I'd ask guys, are you still catching fish on this? And I get a lot of people say, yes, I still use them. Quit showing them, that kind of stuff. So, that's what I want to know. If everybody's throwing a shaking minnow on a lake, is that the only thing they're biting, or is everyone's throwing it? You
Everybody's
just don't
throwing it.
know. Right.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
that's
everybody's
sort of the
throwing
way I
that.
got with that.
When one of my favorite baits back in the day, and I'm as guilty as you are. I don't throw it anymore, and I used to do great on the rivers with it. Was the Rebel Crawdad?
Yep.
Was
The
I
backward one.
my goodness, on the Illinois and Mississippi River and any stream you'd want to go to, if there were a bass there in just a regular crawdad color, that thing was absolutely killer. And why I got away from that, another one, and I won a couple tournaments back on the day, was a Bomber 2A. And
Hmm.
I can't find those anymore at all. They're just those are just baits. That would be a bait that I would. I remember you had mentioned Rick Clum before, and I remember reading an article in the late '90s where or mid '90s where Rick Clum was talking about cranking wood, and that was with his RC1 and RC3. I know you remember those,
Yep.
right? And so then I go, I'm going to start cranking wood, and it was a Bomber 2A, and it had that heart-shaped lip on it. But that thing on 15-pound test would come through cover so good, and in the fall, it was deadly, and then completely got away from it,
Yeah, you
and
just
I
get
bet
away.
I have it. Yeah, and I don't know why we do that. You've gotta have a collection of some of those older baits at home, don't you?
I got quite a few, and frankly, most of them I still don't try. I mean, I live on a lake, and you'd think you just try them, but I just don't ever try them, And there's the old rogues I still do because I've caught too many fish on the old original Smithwick rogue, especially the big one.
Mhm.
I still throw those. Those will still be on my rod no matter what. But it's a different action than the new Japanese ones, but it still works. But that's the one that I probably still 30-year-old baits that I still have a stock of that I'll throw quite a bit.
Yeah, that's fun. John Haas just came in and said, I love watching the lives because I learn more and more about fishing. I thank you all for your knowledge. John, we appreciate you being here. And that's what's fun about this is because that's all we're doing is just talking fishing. We're two guys talking fishing. And, if you guys got any questions or comments for John, please feel free to. Tony Kerr. Oh, hi, Jim and John. Tony Kerr just came in. Hi, Tony. How are you? Nice for you to be here. And but yeah, those dull baits. And before we went live, another one I want to bring up and because I want to get your take on some of the older plastics. But back in the day, the first company I started working for, the first sponsor I ever had was a company called Producto Lure when they were still out of Lake Mary, Florida. And the original tournament worm, the 8-inch tournament worm, did me that. And there was another one called the Vibrator. Those two did me more good and gave me more confidence as an angler because it seemed everywhere you went, that was just one of those baits that if you could hit the water with it, you were going to catch a fish. And what was one of the plastics that you remember way back when that was just always one that you gravitated toward?
Mine was the Dingaling, the
Oh
original
yeah.
Dingaling. Before there was speed worms and before all that, the Dingaling. I drew a guy at Lake Havasu. He's a Marine out of Yuma, and all he had was a giant bag of grape dingalings, and he gave me the flipping stick, and I caught my first bass in a real tournament on that bait, and I won so much money on that dingaling for years. I still have them, and it's another bait. I got a few bags of them, but I've never, I throw a Yamamoto swimming worm now. I don't throw the dingaling, but that was a key for me. That bait was always catching, like you said with that Producto.
Gene Elkins here, one heck of a great guy and an awesome angler in his own right. So my favorite smallie bait is a river to sea joint minnow. They quit making it several years ago, but I own several dozen. Gene, that doesn't surprise me with you at all, brother. That guy can catch some smallmouth. And John, have you ever thrown that one that Gene was talking about?
I don't think I've thrown that one. I got a lot of the old river to sea baits, but yeah, a lot of the old they have some tremendous baits that they
Yeah.
discontinued that I've got, and they never sold, so they're gone. So yeah, the guys that collected them and still have them, they're way ahead of the game.
Now, when you're before I'm going to ask one more question before we go to break. Now, you've got where you are now in Texas, and then where you go Toho next week. Are your I guess it's just going to depend on what the water temperatures are too. But is your looking for fish going to be the same, or is a little bit more different in Florida just because so many of those fish are much shallower than they may be here? Is it going to be more of a rogue bite there, you think, or jerk baits, or that swimming worm in Florida?
Yeah, Florida makes you just can count out 10 feet and deeper.
Hmm.
So, it makes your choices a lot simpler and where you're looking. Here, these guys are catching them out in the middle of the dang lake and timber,
Yeah.
10 feet deep over 50 feet. So you have a lot more options here you have to look at. So yeah, I love going to Florida, keep my options simple. And it's more about retrieve speed and
Sure.
things like that on Florida than here where it's could be a million different lures.
Yeah, I want to talk a little bit about retrieve speed and stuff like that, especially when fishing deeper and a couple other things. When we get back, we're going to take a little bit of a break. Again, I want to thank John Murray for joining us. We're going to take about a 2.5 minute break. We will come right back and talk more with him. So do not go anywhere unless you're going to the bathroom or got to get some popcorn or something. Then join us right back here in 2.5 minutes, and we'll continue right here with John Murray, Slickfish Radio. Located in Springfield, Illinois' largest selection of sports and sportswear, hunting, fishing, specialty shops and services, a 65-foot Ferris wheel, 16,000-gallon saltwater aquarium, and industry-leading knowledgeable employees. You don't take chances at Shields, ever.
At Lure Parts Online, we have everything you need to make your own lures, tie your own flies, pour soft plastics, and more. Easy ordering ensures you get your products quickly. You can build all you need to create your own angling success at Lure Parts Online. Cast King, fueled by innovation through novel concepts and ingenious designs, markets directly to consumers with unprecedented cost-effective e-commerce practices, cutting costs by 30% more on average. Cast King empowers anglers of all skill levels to achieve things never thought possible. Find out more at castking.com. Mudhole is your number one source for custom fishing rods. Mudhole is the world's largest supplier of rod building supplies, information, education, and instruction. The best components and brands you trust, including MHX, CRB, American Tackle, Pro Products, Fuji, AFCO, and more. It's easy to build your own fishing rods at mudhole.com. With 25% of net profits donated to faith-based and clean water initiatives, Wire to Fish Coffee was founded by folks who love Jesus, a good day of fishing, and great coffee. With every bag of Wire to Fish coffee, you support clean water, the sport of fishing, and helping others with a better quality of life. Find out more, wiretofishcoffee.com. Believing quality is measured by lifespan, harnessing their unique chemistry, engineering, and know-how, Dakota Lithium lasts 4 times longer, powering your passions and backing it up with an 11-year warranty. Find out more at dakotalithium.com.
Hi, this is Jim Crowley. Make sure to catch my other show, Jim Crowley Outdoors, where we travel across North America pursuing anything that swims. We always detail our equipment and techniques and more, all in the pursuit of helping you to become a better angler. Jim Crowley Outdoors can be seen on Wire to Fish TV Monday to Friday, 2 p.m. Pacific Standard Time and 4 p.m. Central Standard Time on Sling, Flex, Sports Tribal, Bistro TV, Local Now, and more streaming stations. Hey, and we are back on Slickfish Radio. My guest is John Murray. John, thanks again for joining us. I got some more comments on here. Ted Cobb said, you do a great job with these live shows. Well, thanks, Ted. I sure appreciate that. Very nice of you to say. Anyway, I want to talk to you, John, a little bit more about fishing deep. And just because are the places you're going this year, are any of that going to be more so in your wheelhouse when the summer patterns come around, or is like where are some of the places you're going this year, and will some of that stuff come into play?
Well, yeah, I mean, the two that I come to my mind are real quick are Pickwick in the spring or in the summer. We got there in May. It'll be an offshore bite. It's not a deep water bite, but it's an offshore bite. I've had some good days there. And the other one is a Thousand Islands out of Waddington or up in Messina actually at Thousand Islands, and that just you're catching 5 pound smallmouths in
Oh,
30, 40 feet of water. So those two are going to be fun, and those are just two of my favorite places to go. The other one, the James River, is you don't catch any fish over 4 feet of water, but it's still fun fishing.
yeah, man, catching smallmouth on deep like that, is that a lot of, without getting into detail about, but is that a lot of drop shotting, or how do you like to fish deep for those smallmouth?
It is the drop shot and capital of the world. I mean, it just works perfect for them. Guys are now catching, you still catch them on tubes. Guys catch them
Mhm.
on Ned rigs. A lot of guys are throwing a little jig up there, a little finesse type jig up there, catching them. But the drop shot is catching them. Last year, I caught some really big ones on a Carolina rig.
That's cool.
Just seems like the bigger ones wanted that Carolina rig down there. But yeah, I mean, those big smallmouths, they'll bite. You just got to find out where they're living.
Yeah, they'll hit. I've always told people, just because they have small at the beginning of their name doesn't mean they won't hit a big bait. They will crack. That's why a lot of musky fishermen, when they're fishing topwaters, catch big smallmouth in the summertime. Those smallies will crack a big bait like that. What are some of? And I know you throw a lot of Yamamoto stuff. And they've got such an incredible array of plastics. What are some of your favorite baits in a lineup for like both largemouth and smallmouth?
Well, I think my overall is the hula grub. I grew up fishing those. I fished with Gary Yamamoto in the U.S. Open back in the day, and we threw
Cool.
hula grubs. Back then we put them on just an open hook jig head, a football head. Now I put them on a weedless head, like football head.
Mhm.
But the hula grub just catches them anywhere. You can use you got the new 2.5 incher with a little 1/4 ounce head, and man, it'll catch smallmouths all day long. And you go up to the 4 or 5 inch tails. And I mean, it's going to imitate a crawdad. It's got the great colors. It's got the great action. That's my number one Yamamoto bait. Really, I mean, obviously the Senko's there too, but the
Sure.
Hula Grub's my number.
Now, do you notice that with smallmouth too? Twin tails and smallmouth just kind of really seem to go together. It's just a great trailer, even when you're throwing like a little finesse jig. I mean, like you said, tubes work, little craws work, Ned rigs, but I know when I'm throwing a small jig for smallmouth, anything that has just like a small twin tail on the back. And I think I learned that from back in the day from probably that hula grub. I think I remember seeing it not only from Yamamoto, probably chompers used to be
Hmm.
real popular for a while there, and those baits used to be really good. But they just catch them. You could probably catch thing fish on a hula grub just about anywhere you go, couldn't you?
Yeah, and I used to. I mean, when I first came back east, that's what I'd throw. I would throw a hula grub. I wouldn't throw a jig and pork or any of that stuff. I caught them plenty good. So I've proved it myself from the up in north in the New York to Florida. I've caught them on hula grubs anywhere, and it's just down the Alabama spots down in the river. We used to flip a hula grub and catch them. So it's just a good all around bait. If they're eating crawdads or anything, even bluegills, they're going to eat that hula grub.
That's really cool. And I do. That is just one of those plastics that there's another one like a Jean LaRue mega ring tube. That was a big one for a while, and that caught a fish. Probably one of my favorite plastics of all time is just that tube craw. I think Big Bite made it for a while or whatever, but that tubes always seem or grubs like that always seem to be a big fish bait. And we've come out with creature baits and everything like that. And I think people get away from some of those, and those are just baits that are gonna catch them, like you said, just about anywhere, aren't they?
Well, and I grew up throwing the Gitsit, the original Gitsit
Oh,
Bobby
yeah.
Garland designed in Arizona. And he'd throw it on a 16th ounce head and it would just glide down. And today, I mean, it's almost identical action to a Ned rig right now. So everyone
Yeah.
throws a Ned rig. But back in the day, we threw the same thing with just the old Gitsit, 2.5 inch Gitsit. And, it basically the same thing, the way it falls, the way it catches them. It, you know, we've all seen it, the bait cycle in our sport,
Mhm.
and they come back as something a little different, but it's basically the same action.
It's when you were talking about, the Gets It, I remember, Bobby Garland. I met him at a show when I was just a kid, and we're actually sitting down in a restaurant after the show, and he went through Gets It stuff and fishing and everything, just sitting there talking to guys. And if you would have known what a tutorial it was when you're sitting there talking to him at a young age like that. And then the more I got into the outdoor industry, and so many people went back to that little bait was just one of those plastics that changed everything. You know,
Well,
it, how do you feel about that?
no, exactly. That gets it with Bobby Garland.
Yep.
He showed Guido Hibden at the U.S. Open in 1981 that bait, and Guido took it and made it super.
Oh,
He called it a G2. He
yeah.
showed Shaw Grigsby, and sight fishing was born. But Bobby Garland was way before those guys doing it out on the West Coast and using that little finesse bait, little spinning rod, 8 pound line, and catching every bass. I mean, I fished for 2 or 3 of the first bass tournaments I ever fished. Bobby Garland smoked everybody, and he was throwing that gets it and the tails he made. So yeah, I mean, literally, yeah, I Guido is known as the sight father of sight fishing. Bobby Garland showed him that. So it's sort of a cool story that it that little gets it, that little tube started all that interest over the years.
It's just funny that you say because I'm starting when you're bringing up some of these old guys, and I love the history of the sport, right? I absolutely love it. And when you mentioned Guido Hibden, we were at it was one of the same shows. It might have been the year after, but Guido was there, and it was when the Carolina rig um, first became popular or became popular again. And he goes, "Well, all that is a glorified catfish rig, but by golly, it'll catch them." is what he said, and I just thought that was pretty funny. And but he was just both those guys were just so down to earth. And if you ask them a question, they would just stand there and talk to you. And I had really good experiences with both those guys. And it had to be really cool when you were fishing with some of those guys, you probably got some great stories, but were they just seemed like really, really nice guys, were they?
Well, my first tournament, when I was 20 years old, I got my truck and drove to Megabucks, the first Megabucks they ever had
Oh,
down in Leesburg, Florida. And I got there, I didn't know anybody. I just got third in the U.S. Open, and Guido Hibden had got fourth. And so I got to this hotel. I didn't know anybody. No one would talk to me. But Guido Hibden came out, put his arm around me, and said, "Hey, I'm going to show you the ropes." He showed me the baits. He showed me, where you want to look for. He just really made it comfortable, like he did a lot of, I mean, he did that with Davey Hyde, he did that with tons of guys. But
wow.
I experienced that with him. He just gave himself out, just to help you out. And he was famous at that point. I mean, he was one of the most famous fishermen there was, but he took time for me, and I always remember that. And that was always impressive to me, that he would just take time out for a guy he'd met a couple times, and look out for you.
That's really awesome. That's really cool. Are there any guys that you're fishing with now? I mean, I know there's a lot of younger guys coming up, but some guys that, you kind of like they're, hey, I can help you with this because when they come in, I don't care how good they are, they got to be a little nervous. I mean, you're going up against some, if not the best in the world. And are there some guys that you're just talking to, you're like, hey, I think maybe this kid's going to go somewhere, or he's got the right attitude?
Well, there's a ton of them right now. Such a different world. The information that we used to give guys
Mhm.
and on fishing and stuff like that is almost not right anymore. With
Right.
the
Yeah.
with the
It's changed.
electronic
Yeah.
stuff, these kids come in, and they don't have any interest in what happened 10 years ago, because it's a new world with this electronics age. There's just so many good young fishermen now out there that it's impressive. Trey McKinney. I mean, I met
Yep.
him when he first got into Bass Opens, and I was just impressed with how knowledge he had. I mean, he not just a scope. He knows how to fish every kind
Yep.
of fishing, and every kind of lake. He's not intimidated to go fish against anybody. Obviously,
Yep.
we've proved that. But I met him before he had all the success, and just a good kid. I always enjoyed talking to him because, I met Jacob Wheeler when he was 21 years old and sat in a parking lot at Sandusky for 4 hours just talking fishing. And I told my wife after, I'm like, this kid this
Oh yeah.
kid's amazing, and you just, that's the fun part of the sport, is seeing the commonality and learning, and seeing the passion these guys have and the knowledge they have at young age.
It's really interesting. This is like the third time I've noticed, and I've said if you've been in the industry long enough, you're usually about one person away from knowing everybody.
Yep.
And I've been with Rapala for about 17 years, and I was with Dan Quinn when when they signed Wheeler and Not Defoe. I was at the sports show where those guys all met up in Chicago, and I've got a picture somewhere of me, Quinn, and Wheeler together, and Wheeler just looks like he's 16 years old. I
Right.
mean,
Just
and had his hat on, a little bit crooked and everything. And I was going to show it to him at ICAST last year because I bumped into him for a little bit. And I forgot, and I'm going to do it this year and just go, Do you remember? Do you remember this day? But you didn't think back then. A very nice, very personable kid, and then turns into, well, is going to be a future legend, probably of the sport. With how much he has done, and he's another one. Just every time I see him, he's like, "Hey, just a really, really nice guy." But to spend that time with him way back then, it's got to be pretty cool sometimes to see the heights that he's went.
yeah, and you know it. I knew it. I mean, just talking to them for a couple hours, you just knew they had it, and they were going to
Yeah.
go places. And Trey McKinney and Jacob, I mean, they're very similar, and there's a ton of them. I met Aaron Martins when he was a little kid, and
Wow.
he blew us away. We knew he was going to whoop our butts, but I mean, you just get that sense right away.
Yeah, that's just really, really cool. So what are your plans this year? Is it going to be one circuit? Are you bouncing between a couple different, or what are you doing?
I entered these Bass Opens. There's four of those. A reason I really fish it. The last one's on Leech Lake. I've never been there, and
Oh,
there's not a
cool.
lot of not a lot of tournament lakes in the country that I've not been to. That's one of them. So I go, well, I'd like to do that. And then the Tackle Warehouse has some really good lakes, like I said, James River
Yeah.
and Pickwick and stuff. So I figured I'd fish those. Five fish limits. Not the every fish counts. I got my butt whooped pretty bad in those, so I'm going to go back to the old way that I know how to fish, and just really sort of enjoy the lakes. Like
Yep.
Sam Rayburn here. I mean, I'm not on them, but I'm just going to enjoy being out there fishing tomorrow.
Oh, and you get to Leech. I love fishing Minnesota, man. Minnesota is absolutely one of my favorite states to fish. There are so many good lakes with and I mean Minnesota bass 5 6 pounds. I mean, there's a lot of those lakes there, and when you can combine largemouth and smallmouth, Leech is one of them. But when you can combine those fish like that, it's a hoot. It's an absolute blast.
I went to the first Minnetonka tournament,
Oh
and
yeah,
Peter T and those guys showed them how to Carolina rig, and I mean I was flipping grass like everyone told me, and yeah, I fell in love with Minnesota fishing right then and there. You just caught fish all day, good ones, and
yep.
so much fun.
And you can catch them on swim jigs in 2 feet of water to catching them out 25 foot on grass lines if you had to. They're
Yeah,
everywhere.
yeah,
It's
that's
just a
great
really
fishing.
cool place.
Yeah.
So, hey, I wanted to, one more thing before we let you go. I want to talk to you about your guiding a little bit. And so, if people know if they want to go, I think you're on Watts Bar, and are you on Chickamauga too?
I do Chickamauga too. I'm
Okay,
15 minutes from Chick. I live on Watts Bar.
right.
Both of them are good lakes. Yeah, I saw one of your guys, Tony Kerr.
Yeah,
He came down with me a couple
yeah,
of months or years ago and caught uh, a a paddlefish, the only paddlefish I ever caught in my boat, and he caught it.
cool.
It's snagged. They don't
Yeah,
bite, but
yeah.
we catch all sorts of weird things on those lakes. You're always getting bites on Watts Bar, different kinds of species, and it might be a striper one day, it might be walleye one day, it might be crappie, but those lakes are full of fish. Chickamauga obviously has big ones.
Mhm.
I can't say that I've gone out there and caught 12 pounders. I've never done that, but it has the potential like this lake to do that. But both the lakes are fun, and if you're down in those areas, definitely look me up at johnmurrayfishing.com,
Okay.
and we can get out and catch a few fish.
Well, Lee and his son Tony are both on tonight. So Lee
Yep.
Kerr just said hi, John, and two at phenomenal bait company they have there in Big City Fishing, and just absolutely great guys. That's really cool that you got to do that with them. Like I said, yeah, they're just great guys. So yeah, and you're on Facebook, you're on Instagram, so they can find you there. Is there any place else that they can find you?
That's pretty much it. I got a website,
Yep.
johnmurrayfishing.com. But yeah, just I'm somewhere, and yeah, it's I love I really enjoy guiding. I've had great clients, Lee and Tony. I mean, it just numerous, and a lot of them from Illinois. I seem to get a lot of people come down from Illinois to Watts Bar. It's always nice to my wife's family's from Illinois, so I'm somewhat familiar with it up there. So
That's
it's
why
always
you
been a
moved.
fun trip, huh?
That's why you moved. You went
Yeah,
south. That was a
it's
good
out.
call. That's a good
Yes.
call. Oh, it's funny. Well, buddy, I sure appreciate. We run into each other a couple times a year. It shows, and I'm guessing probably the next time I'll probably see you is probably at ICAST.
Yep.
But I'll always look forward to it. Be cheering for you, and you always got a welcome place on this show. I always appreciate how accessible you are, and always a good time talking fishing and talking old baits with you, man. I absolutely love that stuff, and I bet you and I could sit down to spend a couple hours probably going back over old stuff and just get a big kick out of it.
For sure, and that no doubt about that.
Well, hey, man, be safe out there. I hope you do well. God bless you and your family. And thanks again for your time, John. I sure appreciate it.
Well, thank you, Jim. Appreciate it. Bye.
Yeah, John is just one of the nicest guys, one of the most accessible, and I sure appreciate him taking time, especially when he's got a tournament tomorrow and he wanted to do that. We got a lot of great guests coming up on the show. I just like John. He's just one of those great guys, man. We've had some cool conversations at shows, and thank you, William. And it's just great. So just to let you guys know. Again, I appreciate you all being on here again, man. This is great. We're going to give you some discount codes like we always do, but I want to tell you some other cool stuff that we have going. Now, for Lure Parts Online, I give you the discount code all the time, but it's JC Outdoors 10. But make sure on social media, guys and ladies who are all here tonight, make sure that you check Lure Parts Online out on YouTube and TikTok as well as Facebook because we have different discount codes there that you guys can use. And we're coming out with a lot of new products. I've got a new product video coming out next week. This week, we were showing you how easy it can be to pour your own plastics in soft molds as well as aluminum molds. We're always doing something at Lure Parts trying to show you how to build better baits. Now, tomorrow night, I'm going to be doing the first live on TikTok for Lure Parts Online. So go to the Lure Parts Online page, 6 o'clock. We're going to start the live, and I'm just going to build some baits, and we're going to take some questions. And I don't even know what we're going to build yet. I'm going to pull out some tackle boxes, see what I'm low on stock on. And me and you, if you join me, me and you are going to build baits, and we're going to talk bait building and hopefully answer any questions that you have. We got some more people chiming in right here. Thanks. Good show again. Our friends over at Casking. And there's that code that everybody asks me at the sports shows for all the time. And we've handed out a bunch of them. And I'll be bringing the codes with me to the Quad Cities, to the QCCA show this weekend that I'll be in Rock Island. But this is a 20% off code, and that is JC52AFF. All you got to do there is anytime, every time you go to Casking and you decide to get something, please put in that code. You get 20% off. So what I'm telling you is if you use this code, you'll never pay retail at Casking again. And a lot of you have done that. I've got some great emails, been talking to a lot of you who are big Casking fans now. I'm thrilled. I'm glad. I would never promote anything that I didn't use. And the Casking reels and tools and tackle boxes I put them through heck, and they've more than survived. And a lot of you have too, and I'm glad you're doing well with them. Our friends over at Mudhole, like I told you guys before, my Jim Crowley Signature Series rod kits are doing very, very well over there. I think they're still number one, but Mudhole always has sales on too. So if you're interested in rod building, even if you've never done it before, I took up rod building later in life. Go to Mudhole. The videos are there. If you ever have a question on rod building, you can contact me. It's very easy to get a hold of me through any social media outlet. I will do my best to answer your rod building questions. We'll have a couple more rod building things coming up. I think actually got a new rod video coming out tomorrow for Mudhole. So make sure you tune into my social media stuff for that. But check out, if you're interested in all-in-one kits, okay, just all-in-one where everything comes together, check out the Jim Crowley Signature Series at Mudhole. There's 3 rods. There's a Ned rig rod, there's a jerkbait wacky worm rod, and there's also a bladed jig rod. So you can build all 3 of those. I've done videos for all of them. So if you ever decide to get one of those, email me and say, Jim, can you send me the link to show me how to build this rod? You're darn right I will. I would be happy to do so, and be even happier when you tell me you're catching fish on it. All right, our friends over at Wired to Fish Coffee, actually finishing up my Wired to Fish coffee here tonight. And if you go to Wired to Fish, remember, they give about almost 20% of their profits back to the sport of fishing, clean water, and faith-based initiatives. Come on, guys. What a great company to do that. On top of that, the coffee is phenomenal in their medium and dark roast. And you don't even got to pay full price for it. Put in that code right there, Slickfish, all caps, and you'll get 15% off. Mark my words on this one. If you try this coffee, it will be one of your favorites, if not your most favorite. It's incredibly smooth and hardly any aftertaste. And you know how strong coffees can be. Not Wired to Fish coffee. They help our sport. They give back to it. Faith-based initiatives as well, and they've got great taste in coffee. So put in that code Slickfish, you get 15% off. Our friends over at Dakota Lithium, and John Murray runs Dakota Lithium batteries as well. If you go to Dakota Lithium, put in that code Slickfish10, and you will get 10% off there. You guys are great. I like I said, I say this all the time, and I hope you don't get tired of hearing it, but I really truly mean it. I wouldn't have a show if it wasn't for all of you. I just wouldn't. And the kindness you showed me at the sports shows, and coming up and talking, of watching both shows on Wired to Fish TV. We're in the top 5 again for this quarter. I'm just, you know what? I thank you. God bless you all. Thank you so very much. I also want to thank our friends at Lure Parts Online, Casking, Mudhole, Wired to Fish Coffee, Dakota Lithium, and Shields. Stay tuned for my social media. Stay tuned to my social media. We have another special guest coming very, very, very soon. I hope you all have a great rest of the week. Thanks again for tuning in. Enjoy your night.